Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I think we're going to have a pretty good time in this video because we're doing some moon math, and I know how much everybody enjoys moon math, and so I think this is going to be a pretty fun one. What we're going to be going over is how much Jasmy you need to retire, and so I've built out a whole spreadsheet that we can we'll dive into a little bit further on in the video. But to start, we're gonna actually jump right into the Jasmy chart. So as we can see on the chart, we have seen some things going on over the past day or so. So what we can see is, obviously Jasmy did run up with the pullback, and the rest of the market, it has come down. It was kind of holding on this line pretty well. As we can see, it has dropped through the trend line. This is kind of a point, like I was saying with zones, even though it's crossed the line, we can see it hasn't necessarily broken below kind of when it broke below the trend line here. And so essentially there's one of two things that's going on here. One, this line's been invalidated, and it could have been even invalidated with this break, and we are sitting in this kind of more descending wedge rather than kind of this like lateral wedge, right? That is a possibility, and if that is the case, we'd expect Jasmy to kind of run down to this level, and then once it hits this level, we could expect it to come back up, possibly bounce off of this level, or do something essentially in this general range until it either breaks out one way or the other. Ideally, we're still kind of running under the hope/assumption that we're going to be kind of moving into a bull market later on in the year. So if that were the case, obviously we'd expect to see kind of a bounce off of here, maybe come up, maybe bounce one more time, and then break out and move upwards. So that's kind of what I'm expecting to see from the chart. But now that we've been over the chart, let's go on and dive right into the Jasmy retire numbers. So my favorite part, let's do some moon math. So as we go in, the reason I blacked out a lot of these is I didn't want to give you guys like information overload. So I'm going to be kind of unblocking these kind of a little bit piece at a time, so we can kind of understand how this sheet is broken down and why I've made some of the assumptions that I've made. This video should be absolutely picture perfect examples as to why nothing that I say is financial advice, and you should never listen to a YouTuber when it comes to decisions with your money. Because as we can see here, I'm going to have to make a lot of assumptions, and essentially you're just taking the assumptions that I made at face value, right? I could go in and give you the backup and support for why I made all of these decisions, but that would take forever. So, ultimately you can agree or disagree with what I'm saying, but you should definitely not take it as advice, because there are some things where my assumptions could just be wrong. And there are two things that I did intentionally leave out because I didn't want to make the sheet too complicated, but I left out inflation, and I also left out tax rates. So that itself is going to throw off the numbers in this sheet to a certain degree, because ultimately, I don't know anybody's tax situation. So I didn't even want to like go down that rabbit hole, as well as inflation. Inflation is something that, one, it makes the calculations a little bit more complex, but inflation allegedly has come back down to 2 or 3% in the US. If you're in Argentina, inflation's like 100%, and therefore 2 or 3% is grossly underestimating things. Like there's a lot at play with both of those, which is why I've intentionally left them out. So starting with our assumptions, I wanted to go through and look at essentially a couple different things. So to start, we've got the safe withdrawal rate, and what a safe withdrawal rate is this is essentially like the risk-free return of what you could get on your money. So right now the safe withdrawal rate is about 5.5%. This is essentially like the Fed funds rate. Obviously we're expecting to see interest rates cut over the next year or so. We are kind of going into like a quantitative easing cycle. So I have set this number intentionally lower than maybe what it would be right now, just because I don't think we would expect to see that rate, at least going on too much further into the future. After that, what I have is essentially the base level cost of living for each of the four jurisdictions that I chose. And then after that, what I did is like a slim cost of living. So I essentially put it at 95% of the cost of living, just because, maybe if you're trying to skimp out and, you're not necessarily trying to live comfortable, but you essentially are freed from the burden of having to have a 9-to-5, then you'd be able to do this. Comfortable is essentially cost of living plus about 50%. The reason I made that decision is because, I feel like if you're living at the cost of living, you maybe can't afford some of those luxuries that you may want to. Again, small luxuries, but luxuries nonetheless. And then cushy is what I put at 3 times cost of living, because at that point I feel like, you can kind of live where you want, you can eat out whenever you want, you can kind of mostly travel, a decent amount. You're doing pretty well. And then after that, I've got chillin', which is I put that at 10x cost of living, because I feel like if you're sitting at this point, money doesn't really matter too much to you. So, I think that's kind of where we're at there. If we look, the 4 jurisdictions I chose were the US, Mexico, Vietnam, and Spain, just to kind of give a sense on what cost of living can do to how much Jasmy you would need to retire. So after that, we will unhide these. But before we go on ahead and do that, if you are finding the information in this video useful so far, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. I am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of October. This is a new channel, so I am still trying to kind of push the growth on it, as best I can. And so if you are finding this information valuable and entertaining, please do like and subscribe. It really does help me out. So anyway, moving back in, if we unblock these, we can see these are kind of what the standard living or the cost of living are, and then kind of the multiple on each of them. So again, finding cost of living was pretty hard, because there were some where it was saying that you needed, I think, like $4,000 a month to live in the US, and like rent in most places is like well over half of that. So that did not really make any sort of sense to me. So the closest number that I could find that I felt like was pretty reasonable, and again, this is a nationwide average. So obviously if you're in New York, this is probably not right. If you're in rural Alabama, like this might be a little high. So anyway, this is kind of the nationwide average. And then essentially I was able to find another site that essentially kind of mapped these other countries' cost of living as a percentage of the US. So we could see, looking at this, is like Mexico, it was almost 46% less than what it is in the US, which is how we got to this number. And then, same thing with Vietnam and Spain. So looking at this, these are essentially kind of the numbers that we have to hit. And again, the safe withdrawal rate is essentially, you are wanting, like, this needs to be the interest on the principal that you have, right? Because if you're only doing a safe withdrawal rate of 4%, then this amount, essentially, like, you can't be touching the principal. So you can only be touching the interest, and so this has to be the interest. So as you can imagine, some of these numbers are going to be pretty large. So starting out, if we look at the US, let's just kind of go a little bit at a time. So what I did is I did Jasmy price as of 2030, and I put a whole bunch of different ranges, because I didn't, I have already done price prediction videos. Obviously there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into price predictions. So I tried to pick a good range of prices, more from like closer to my bear case. Actually, I think this is more my base case in my price prediction video, all the way up to numbers that I've heard for like the Jasmy internal team, like their price prediction. I do not endorse this number. I think this number is crazy, but this is the Jasmy team's internal number, like KPI metric. And so I put it in here just because I've heard from people in the comment section that, this number is a recurring theme. So I put it in here just so you guys can see what that would do. So anyway, we'll just go on ahead and kind of unblock the US, and we can kind of see where we're at in terms of how much Jasmy you would need to be able to retire comfortably. So as we can see here, if Jasmy is only sitting at about 14 cents in 2030, and you want to live on a slim retirement of basically withdrawing 4% a year, you would need about 18 million Jasmy, going up all the way to about 191 million Jasmy, which is in the chillin' zone, right? Obviously, we can see as the price goes up, the amount of Jasmy you need goes down, because obviously the gains are a lot higher. So, we can see potentially, if the Jasmy team does in fact hit their internal metric of $17 per Jasmy, we only need 1.5 million, and we're in the chillin' zone, which would be super cool. Again, I think that's exceedingly unlikely. I think this is probably the range that we could most reasonably expect to see. So again, if we're looking here, it's anywhere between 1.2 million to 53, depending on, again, where you're at in the matrix here. So moving on to Mexico, I wanted to show kind of what a lower cost of living could potentially do for your Jasmy holdings. So here, looking at this, we've got same thing. Slim, we're sitting at about 9.8 million Jasmy. Chillin', we're at about 103 million Jasmy. Again, overall, these numbers may sound pretty unattainable to some of us, or in this case, and some of these cases, to probably all of us. And I feel like that's fair. We do have to remember that Jasmy is almost $1 billion token. So it's not like we're looking at like, some $10,000 moonshot that we're going to be able to retire on $100. Like that's definitely not where we're at with Jasmy. So, we do need to take that into consideration that some of these numbers are going to be very substantial. So anyway, with that said, continuing on, we can see same thing here. We get down to a point where it's, potentially as little as 80,000 Jasmy might allow us to, retire and live in Mexico on a slim cost of living lifestyle, which would be not too bad. Like, these are the numbers that start to, maybe potentially feel a little bit more attainable for some of us. I have seen, some people in my comment section that, already hold 1 million Jasmy. And so, if I'm those people, I'm starting to look at, these numbers and these numbers, and, it starts to look pretty exciting, if you're holding, that level. So, that's obviously pretty cool to see. And, I'm not at that level, but for those who are, definitely, much respect for you guys. So moving on to Vietnam, same thing, we can see obviously the cost of living is a little bit lower here. So, we actually don't have any scenario in which we would need 100 million Jasmy to retire comfortable, or to retire at all, right? And even at the lowest point, we're only needing, 62,000 Jasmy. I think that's like $1,500 at current prices or something. One thing that I will do is I will edit in a clip at the end of the video where we can see kind of some rough dollar estimations of what this would cost today. So I'll do that at the end of the video. But for right now, this is kind of what we're working off. This is just purely like how much Jasmy do you need to hold, and then we'll go off of what would that Jasmy cost you. So the next one we've got is Spain. So essentially what I wanted to pick is like, this is kind of under the assumption that most of the people watching this are American citizens. So this is kind of what their situation would look like. There are definitely more and more American expats that move to Mexico just because of the cost of living impact. So, this was kind of a secondary situation that, people could kind of compare. After that, obviously Vietnam is one of those places that probably most of us have heard of as being incredibly affordable and a really pretty decent place to live overall. And so this is something where, we can see this is kind of, I would say, the lower band, right? And then I do know there's a large contingent of people who do like to live or would like the opportunity to live in Europe. And so I was trying to look at some nicer Western European countries that have a lower cost of living. So, I ended up deciding on Spain, but, Portugal, Italy, Greece, some of these, have a generally lower cost of living than like the UK, for example, or Germany, or Switzerland especially. But, there's still like a pretty nice place to live, got good weather, located fairly centrally, all that type of stuff. So as we can see here, 100,000 Jasmy to, again, this is like moon math, giga prices. But like if we even pull up somewhere around that, here, this is less than 900,000 Jasmy, and, here we're $1.5 million to live comfortably in Spain. That's not too bad, I think Jasmy hitting $2 is, maybe unlikely, but, in 2030, I guess it's possible, to see a number like this. And so, this is something that is just kind of good to kind of keep in the back of your mind. One thing that's really important when you're talking about moon math like this is, obviously, if we would have done this video 8 months ago, these numbers would probably be half to a third of what they are right now, because obviously Jasmy his price has gone crazy. And so, and it's the same thing with like Bitcoin, right? Obviously in 2010, 2011, you could have bought 1,000 Bitcoin for $50. And obviously if you had 1,000 Bitcoin now, you would be probably in the chillin' category pretty much anywhere in the world. So, that's something to consider is, obviously as the price grows, the more these values grow as well. But ultimately, this is something where the best thing you can do is just start, right? Like obviously I'm not going to be able to go scoop 191 million Jasmy tomorrow. And realistically, I probably won't ever be able to get to 191 million Jasmy, but that's okay. As long as I'm starting and I'm essentially, being responsible and methodical with my buying, then, maybe I can get somewhere in this range potentially. And, that might, well, probably more like this range, but like that, that might be possible. And if it does hit previously unimaginable valuations, which would probably be in this area, then yeah, I mean, maybe only 150,000 Jasmy could get me to at least retiring somewhat slim in the US. Like that could be pretty cool. So, that's something just to consider here. Let me pause this real quick and I will edit back in kind of the dollar amount. All right, so I have just gone in and I have added in the second row which essentially converts the above Jasmy numbers into like dollars at today's Jasmy price. So Jasmy's currently sitting around like 1.9 cents in USD. So, you know, that's kind of where the price is at. And we can see, you know, obviously if we wanted to, you know, retire on 14 cents, you know, 14 cent Jasmy price, chilling in the US, that's going to cost us about 3.6 million, which, you know, I don't know, you know, maybe some of my watchers are independently wealthy, but I probably will not be getting here anytime soon. But some of these, you know, lower numbers definitely do seem achievable. Again, you know, maybe not today or tomorrow, but, you know, maybe over some DCAing of months or, you know, maybe even a year or two. You know, some of these numbers do look possibly achievable, you know, especially if we're going to go, you know, live in one of these Southeast Asian countries. It's a little bit more affordable. I mean, $4,000, like that's not too bad overall. I mean, obviously, you know, it's definitely a commitment, but it's not, you know, it's not 3.6 million, that much is for sure. Anyway, hopefully this video is helpful for you, and hopefully you enjoy, you know, looking over some moon math as much as I do. I don't know about you, but I felt like, you know, some of the things that I'd found were pretty surprising overall as far as just how, you know, potentially affordable retiring on Jasmy could be, you know, again, provided it hits some of these, you know, astronomical valuations. You know, again, some people may think like, oh, well, you know, this is never going to happen, or this is ridiculous. And yeah, that's fair and, you know, maybe even very possible. But, you know, I guarantee you there were the same amount of people saying that about Bitcoin when it was $300. Oh, Bitcoin will never hit 100 grand. That's ridiculous. It's just $300. So, you know, just to keep that in mind, again, not financial advice. I hope that you can see the leaps in assumptions that had to be made to get to a video like this. But I do think nonetheless it is kind of helpful to kind of shift perspective in terms of what Jasmy prices could potentially do in the future, and what starting DCAing into something like this, you know, could potentially do. Again, you know, you have to make your own decision on if this is right for you. But overall, you know, hopefully, if nothing else, it was an entertaining watch to just kind of get a sense of what some of these numbers could look like, and do nothing else but dream, you know, if anything. So anyway, if you enjoyed the information in this channel and did find it entertaining as well, please do give me a like and subscribe. You know, like I said, I do have that subscriber goal I am trying to hit. Also, if, you know, you have any feedback, comments, you know, I'd love to hear, you know, some of your guys' feedback on some of the assumptions and different things that I made here. So if you do have any of that, you know, please do feel free to drop them in the comments. I do respond to all of them, so you'll be hearing from me. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.